Wonderful. Well, it looks like the audio is working, and that's great to see. We didn't have any technical snafus this afternoon, and it is a great afternoon. I would like to welcome everybody to the webinar for today. My name is Derek Thyssen. I am an loss control consultant with Argent, Workers' Compensation Division of West Bend Mutual Insurance. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, which is ladder safety. I think as you'll see throughout this presentation that I'll be going through today, that there is a very severe consequences for the unsafe use of ladders and not taking the time to make sure that we're using them safely. So let's get started. I do have my email address there if you care to reach out with any questions. There's also a chat feature, I believe, that you can see in the webinar. I'll try to keep up with that as we go through the presentation, but feel free to communicate either of those two ways. So let's first talk about the training objectives that I hope each and every one of you leave here today with. First, we want to make sure that you understand the costs that are associated with ladder fall injuries, not only from your own organizational standpoint, but we're also going to look throughout the nation, some of the costs associated with these very, very severe injuries, and also within Argent's book of business, as we do have a fair amount of employers that use ladders on a regular basis. And if it goes uncontrolled within your organization, or if it has in the past, you're probably familiar with it, but it does have serious ramifications when looking at future premiums from a workers' compensation standpoint. With the presentation, I want you to be able to identify some unsafe work practices as it relates to ladder use. So as you go out into your shops, your warehouses, your construction sites, I want you to take a look at your employees, or even maybe some contractors or vendors that are working within your facility or jobs, and see, are they using the ladder safely? And throughout the presentation, I try to include some different pictures that I've taken, or our department has taken over the year, to help you better identify those unsafe work practices. And along with that, what we can do as employers to help prevent these unsafe work practices from causing an injury to occur. Lastly, I want you to be able to assess your own current ladder safety program within your organization. I know we probably have something on paper that we write some general safety practices on, but let's really take a look at what type of employee training are we providing? How often are we providing it? How do we reinforce these best and safe practices? Do our employees actually know how to inspect the ladder prior to each use and periodically? Do they know what to look for when doing their inspections? And lastly, do we have the right type of ladders to perform our job safely? And you can see if you've gotten any, vendors to send you any brochures in the past few years, you've seen that there's been some technology advancements in the ladder industry over that time frame. And so there are all types of new products today, and I'll show you one too that I've been seeing more of on the construction job sites. So starting with the numbers, and this is looking kind of at our nation as a whole. Each year, about 500,000 people are treated, and about 300 people die from ladder-related injuries. Now, this just isn't specific to workers. It includes all the general public as well. But you can see 500,000 people. That's quite staggering. In fact, look at the cost, about $24 billion, which includes any work loss, medical costs, which we all know is not cheap. Along with that, legal costs, liabilities, and obviously any pain and suffering expenses. One of the studies that I pulled, I believe if it was from the Construction Research Center, my sources are cited down at the bottom there, but it was interesting to see a study that was performed back in 2011, and what they were looking at was different types of demographics as it related to falls from ladders. And what they found is individuals that were male, Hispanic, older, self-employed, and worked for smaller establishments or work in construction, maintenance, or repair, had a higher rate of falls from ladders. And so again, take that back with you to your organization. Do we fit any of that criteria? Do our employers fit any of those demographics? And again, that's something where we should take a closer look and see, again, do we have the proper program in place and controls in place to prevent the ladder injury? When looking at Argent specific book of business, the insureds that we've had from July 7th of 15 to July 7th of 2018, we looked at the cause of injuries that we've had over that time frame. And what I found that was staggering with the numbers that came back from that analysis was falls or slips from ladder or scaffold, and now that would be the cause of these injuries, had the highest average indemnity claim cost of $58,982. Indemnity claim cost, again, just to remind you, is any claim that would have any lost wages attached to it. So if an employee was injured and couldn't return to work for a period of time, usually over 3 days following the date of injury, we as Argent would have to pay them those lost wages, which thus would become an indemnity claim. That would be the average with 58,000. As far as overall average claim cost, so this would not only include your lost time claims, but also your medical only claims, that average cost is $21,163. So even those medical claims, even if we are doing a good job of returning our employees to work following an injury, you can see that they're still severe enough to equate to an average cost of 21,000. And another thing that was just interesting was it had the highest percentage of claims, and this again is related to all of the causes of claims that we have at Argent, but it had the highest percentage of claims to be indemnity or lost time, with a third of those claims reported to Argent resulting in indemnity costs. So pretty staggering numbers, and again, just reinforces the importance of why we want to, provide the right ladders, choose the right ladders, and do the right things when it comes to this, because the injuries are often severe, which again is why we have such high cost of indemnity and high percentages of total indemnity claims as it relates to ladders. Individually looking at some of these claims that we've had, and if you haven't had a chance to do this, I highly encourage you to jump on our WB Connect, www.wbconnect.com, and if you go under our loss control materials, you'll find a link to L4, or large loss lesson learned. And what these are is essentially articles that our loss control representatives are putting together, detailing some of the more serious injuries that our insureds have had, obviously keeping our insureds private along with any of the employees anonymous. But we do want to share these injuries with you, because what comes out of it is basically preventative measures to help your organization avoid these from occurring within your workplace. And this one specifically, as it relates to ladders, was a roofing repair company where it was raining pretty hard one day, and one of their customers obviously noticed a leak with the amount of rain they had, and so they wanted to get up there and patch it up as quick as they could. So right there, the rain should spark a red flag for you. It's going to be more slippery for them to climb that ladder. Not only that, it was approaching dusk, and so it's dark. And as we all know, as it gets dark, it's harder for us to see. And if we don't have lights or headlamps with us, it can just make that task of climbing a ladder much more difficult. In this incident, the employee was climbing onto a 24-foot high roof, and essentially their foot slipped and missed a rung, and they ended up falling. And at the bottom of this statement, I don't want to read through the whole thing for you. You can see the employee suffered fractures to their right foot and wrist and sprains to their left foot. Surgery was required to fix that foot fracture, which then, if you look at the top, the initial estimated cost was over $82,000, and then the impact to their experience modification rating was 0.12 points. So again, going back to those numbers I just showed you in the previous slide, these injuries that we see are extremely serious. They're typically multiple body parts that are injured from a fall off a ladder, typically require surgery, physical therapy, and again, a third of those resulting in lost time or indemnity costs. Not only that, I know we're spending a lot of time on cost, but again, I want to kind of stress the importance of this, that it not only has an impact on those workers' compensation costs through Argent, but you do have the potential for being cited by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA. In fact, for the past several years, looking back at some of the most frequently cited safety violations, and no different last year in 2019, ladders ranked 6th most frequently cited. In fact, 2,700 total violations throughout the country just for ladder safety violations. When looking at the types of violations that OSHA cited, they were based on some different requirements that they've laid out, and not extending the ladder far enough was one of them. We'll talk about that through this presentation. Not used for their design purpose. standing on top or the top step of a step ladder, or even an extension ladder for standing too high, and that's typically greater or not on, or standing on the one of the top 3 rungs, or using a damaged ladder or not having it at that 4-to-1 ratio or the proper angle. And so these are the things as we go out to our facilities and to our job sites, these are the things that should really be raising some red flags, you know, or we should be focused on. Do we have that ladder extended high enough? Are we using it for its design purpose? So keep that in mind, because if we don't look at this, there's a chance that OSHA will down the road and can result in some pretty substantial fines. So moving more into how we can prevent these injuries from occurring, you know, we treat falls from ladders just like we would any other hazard that we encounter within our workplace. And that's by using the hierarchy of controls. And when looking at the hierarchy of controls as it relates to ladders, and again, any other hazard, our first approach should be to look at, is there any way that we can substitute or even eliminate the use of a ladder within our operations? For an example, the pictures that you see here would be some common tasks that we'd find at a lot of the insureds that we have. Changing light bulbs for canopies and overhangs outside of a building, or even just something simple as cleaning the gutters out with all the leaves that are built up. In these cases, these are 2 where we might be able to utilize an extension pole to change a light bulb or an extension hose for a leaf blower to clean out our gutters, thus eliminating the need for a ladder to be used at all. And so we're keeping these employees' feet on the ground where we'd like them to be and not having to pull out a ladder to perform this task. Now, I realize this is not feasible for all the types of tasks you need to perform within your organization. So let's take a look at some, you know, the other approaches that we can have, again, following the hierarchy of controls. Our next step we would want to do is look at some passive fall protection. What I'm talking about here essentially is guard railings. Ladders don't have guard railings. They can allow us to lose our balance, and we don't have a physical barrier for preventing us from falling off of them. So instead of using a ladder for the task we are performing, is there a mobile scaffold? Is there a scissor lift or a mobile elevated work platform that we can use to perform that task? Typically, when you're using scaffolds or mobile elevated work platforms, you're going to have a guard railing in place to act as a physical barrier. And in certain situations, you might also be utilizing personal fall arrest equipment in addition to those guard railings. So I realize, again, not every organization has access to a scissor lift or to a telescopic boom lift, but is there a possibility that we could use it for certain tasks that we perform? Let's say no, you know, we just can't do it. We don't have the means to go about using those types of lifts. Then what about using personal fall arrest equipment? The picture that you see in this slide shows an example of this. Now, you know, OSHA doesn't necessarily require the use of fall protection for this application in the picture of an employee using a step ladder. However, this employee, and again, I took this picture familiar with where it happened on a construction job site, but if you look down to the left, you can see this employee is near a floor opening where the guard railing, obviously being at a height of 42 inches or plus or minus 3, is not protecting him when he's on the 6th or 7th step of an 8 or 10 foot step ladder. In this event, this employee took it upon himself to utilize personal fall arrest equipment to protect himself so he wouldn't fall I would say about 20 some feet down to the lower level. And so this was a situation where he used an anchorage point, a self-retracting lifeline, and a body harness to accomplish that. If all else fails, we rely on our administrative controls to help us with this and again prevent those injuries. And what do I mean by administrative controls? It's making sure that as an organization, we're inspecting our ladders on a periodic basis. To me, when I hear periodic, I want to see them, obviously a visual inspection before each use, but I would also like to see a documented schedule when we're inspecting our ladders to make sure everything is in good working condition. Employee training and how often we're doing that employee training. And if you do want to take it a real step further, institute a ladder permit program. Here in southern Wisconsin, there's been a few jobs that I'm aware of over the years where the general contractor has actually said that anybody using a ladder on this project will need to fill out a permit for it. Basically, they're encouraging the use of a scissor lift or a telescopic boom lift opposed to a ladder because they know those are much safer to use. So it'd be similar to a hot work program. So when looking at the ladders that we use in starting really from the bottom to the top, choosing the right ladder is probably the most critical thing that we should be looking at right from the start. And one of the things, thinking back to those OSHA violations that you saw before, is the ladder tall enough? Our employees should be asking themselves before they head out to job sites or before they start performing a task is this exact question, because I'll be completely honest with everybody on the webinar today. One of the biggest violations as I see when I go out to job sites and employers' facilities is employees standing too high on a ladder. And so a general rule of thumb when looking at the task that we need to perform, it shouldn't exceed 4 feet higher than the ladder being used. That's just a general rule of thumb. And again, I would encourage you to go to your ladder labels and manuals to make sure that's accurate for the product that you're using. But we should really take into consideration how high do we need to reach, and are we within 4 feet of the top of that ladder? The other thing we would need to consider is the ladder exposed to any type of electrical overhead lines or any other type of conductors? And if so, obviously a fiberglass ladder would be a better choice than aluminum ladder, as that can conduct electricity. The picture below the maximum reach picture shows you an example of that. Probably a little embellished, I'd have to admit, but when we're getting this close to overhead power lines, we should definitely be looking at the fiberglass type. The other thing we need to take into consideration is how much weight will be placed on the ladder. All ladders do have a load capacity rating on them, and it should be on a label. Again, those labels like the fade and peel off from time to time. But for this one in particular, it's very important that your employees can quick look and say, hey, what type of ladder am I using? And do I have the capacity I need to perform this safely? And so what we typically want to see is those type 1 ladders, the construction or industrial heavy duty. But if you look at the load capacity, the blue right in the middle, if you look at the load capacity for those, it's only 250 pounds. Now, myself, I weigh around 200 pounds. You start throwing a bunch of tools, equipment, and materials, PPE on me, I'm getting close to that 250 mark. And so we need to take that in consideration. It's not only the weight of the user that they're talking about in that load capacity, it's also the weight of all the things they might be wearing or holding or working with that should be added to that. One thing that will help you choose the right ladder, and again, I encourage you to use this, is a pre-job planning form. In www.wbconnect.com, you'll find this exact form under our loss control materials. And what I did just for the webinar today was fill out a typical type of pre-job planning form specific to the use of a ladder for installing a hanging pipe, and in this scenario on a 3rd floor. And you can see the hazard that's associated with that is obviously a fall from the step ladder. So how do we prevent it in this case? Well, we need to make sure that we have the right height ladder for that job, and that we're using 3-point contact that's on 2 feet, 1 hand, and stable and level. And so this is something that we're seeing, especially in the construction industry, where we have a crew of employees, they're going to be performing a task. They account for the hazards they may encounter for those for that day's work. They look at the preventative measures that they should be taking, and again, gets everybody on the same page. So if you do have more interest in utilizing this form within your organization, you can contact your Argent Loss Control representative or access this form directly on wbconnect.com. So what should we be looking at when we're doing an inspection? Well, to back it up a little bit, we talk about a competent person as being the one that must inspect these ladders on a periodic basis. Now, for those of you out there that are familiar with OSHA requirements, you've probably heard that term many times, competent person. What does competent person mean? Well, to simply put, it means that individual or that competent person has knowledge and authority. So when we're talking about ladder inspections, they have knowledge in what they should be looking for as far as damage or defects, the ratings, the type of ladder, and then they also have the authority to take that ladder out of service if they need to. So those are the two critical items that make somebody a competent person. But you can see that, you know, if any of us out in the webinar land are competent people, we're looking at these pictures and we're saying, hey, there's a missing rung there. That's damage, and I have the authority to take it out of service, to cut it up or put it in the dumpster and get it off the job or out of our facility. The picture at the bottom, if you look real hard, at the top, there's a side rail that's cracked wide open, and an end cap for that side rail that's missing as well. So if we can't get rid of these immediately, we do need to take them out of service or do not use, just so employees know. But ideally, you want to get them out of your operation or off your job as quickly as possible so nobody does use them. The other things that we should be looking for while performing these inspections is there any damage or loose components? You know, the feet of the extension ladders, you know, over time they do get banged up and vibration from being transported from job to job. Some of those nuts do fall off, and sometimes the feet get a little loose. So again, we want to make sure they're in good working conditions. The side rails tend to crack over time. Labels, that's a huge one, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. Labels do need to be legible so that the employee knows what they're using and what capacity it has and how they can safely use it. You know, is the surface of the ladder stable and level? Show you some pictures of that in a little bit. Is there a potential for the ladder to be struck by other workers or equipment? You know, I think we may have a picture in here, but what we're talking about there is setting up a ladder by an overhead door or just a normal door leading into your facility. Could it be bumped into and ultimately knocked over or tipped over, allowing somebody to fall? One of the things as far as an extension ladder is concerned, and is very kind of near and dear to my heart now, is the rope pulley working for the safe setup of an extension ladder? And why is this so important? Well, it goes back to another one of those large loss lesson learned articles, which again are those severe injuries that we had here at Argent to our different insureds. And this is one, again, where I'm not going to read through exactly what happened, because this is one that I actually wrote up for one of my customers. But essentially, the ladder was not equipped with a rope pulley to safely extend the fly section or the top of that ladder. In order to bring that fly section down, an employee climbed up onto the ladder, and another employee, you know, tried to hold on to it and push it off of the wall, the roof that it was leaned up against. And out of nowhere, the fly section came flying down because the rung stop wasn't engaged, and you can see that in the picture what a properly engaged rung stop looks like, and in this case what it looked like. And so the fly section came flying down, and to avoid having it knock himself off the ladder, the employee stuck his arm up to catch it, which he did, but it resulted in a torn rotator cuff, and that's a $94,000 claim and a 0.09 impact on future experience modification rating. So very important that when you're looking at your extension ladders, make sure they have the rope on it, make sure that pulley's there as well, and make sure they have a safe means to extend the fly section. So when we're looking at OSHA requirements, really it's not much height that we're talking about, where OSHA wants to see some sort of stairway or ladder or ramp. It's a break in elevation of only 19 inches. And so this could be really in a lot of places in our facilities and in our job sites. And when looking at the right equipment for the job, a 5-gallon pail turned upside down, while it is readily available in a lot of job sites, it's certainly not the right equipment for the job. Ladders, lifts, scaffolds, again, that's what we need to be using for gaining elevation for the task that we're performing. Now, going back to those most frequently cited standards by OSHA, this is one, again, that I just touched on as well as being one of the top ones that I see when I go out into the field, but it's standing on either the top or top step of a stepped ladder. And so if you look specifically into the OSHA's 1926 standards, that again, that deal specifically with construction industry, they actually state it state it right there in clear ink that we can't do this out in the field. And so again, the ladder manufacturers not only say it, OSHA says it, and it does result in you know, hundreds or thousands of violations each and every year. One of the, I believe one of our insureds we obtained this picture from, had taken it a step further in preventing their employees from using the top step of that step ladder. They actually mounted this safety signage, which acts as a barrier as well. And so not only does it keep employees' feet from reaching that top step, but it also provides the labeling information, which is also critical when we're using this type of ladder. So what do we want to see when we go out to jobs and to our different insurance facilities? Is we want to see them using the step ladder, again, for its design use, but also with a good footing. And in this case, it looks like a poured concrete floor that's level and stable. The other thing that I noticed is both these employees have their belt buckles between the side rails. Now, that's very important from a center of gravity standpoint. If we start to overreach and extend our body where our belt buckle is now outside of the side rail of that ladder, that's going to potentially result in that ladder tipping over and us falling to the floor. So we want to make sure, again, that we have the correct size, that we take the time to position our ladders to where they need to be, and that we don't try to walk our ladders, which means, you know, standing on the ladder and trying to walk the legs from side to side. It's taking the time to make sure we're set up appropriately and that we're not overreaching. Another example of standing on the top or top step is sitting on the top or top step and straddling ladders. Now, both of these, again, we're just extending our center of gravity too high, where any little bump or wrong movement from the employee could result in that ladder to tip over. So labels being very, very critical. I've touched on that a few times already, but on the left, you can see an example of what we want to see. It's clearly legible. It's not faded from all the UV deterioration from being stored on top of the truck from day in and day out. The picture on the right is obviously showing you a step ladder that's in some dire need of new warning labels. Now, if you have ladders at your facility that are in good working condition, but they're only missing a warning label, you can always look to the manufacturer to see if you can obtain replacement labels. Now, I always stress that we want to make sure that we inspect that ladder to make sure it's in good working condition, but you can certainly get those replacement warning labels because, again, they are very critical. An A-frame ladder or step ladder in this case should not be used in a leaning position. Again, this would be an OSHA violation for not being used for its design purpose. A step ladder, in most cases, is not designed to be used this way. Now, I'm going to show you some examples of products that are rated for that type of use. But then this goes back to why it's so important to maintain those labels. Without those labels, an employee might think that all these types of ladders are rated for use up against leaning up against the wall or a beam in this case, and that's just not the case. We need to refer back to what the manufacturer states, and the only way we can do that is if we have those labels. I keep saying stable and level surface. Well, we all know that not all of our work areas are going to be stable and level. Stairwells are notorious for being challenging for the drywallers, for the painters, even the pipe fitters that are putting sprinklers up. They're very difficult to work with because, as we know, it's hard to get a ladder on a level surface given the stair rise and run. Using a paint can to make it level is not a safe alternative. However, if you look to the picture to the right, there is side rail extensions that you can purchase from ladder manufacturers that can help extend one side rail to make sure that we get it to a level position. And what I would encourage you to do, that if you ever run into a situation like this where you do need to get an accessory for your ladder, you go directly to the manufacturer for that ladder for that accessory. That is very important. We don't want to mix and match, different manufacturers' products because they're not tested in the same way. Use 3-point contact. Again, that's 2 feet, 1 hand, or 2 hands, 1 foot. In this case, holding a cinder block while climbing a ladder will not allow us to achieve 3-point contact. Instead, on a project like it looks like from the picture, there's got to be material handling equipment that's readily available to get that cinder block to where it needs to be, opposed to an employee carrying it. It's just taking the time to do it safely, right? Which I know is always a struggle for each and every one of us. But in this case, it could result in a fall injury, which we've shown you has very serious ramifications. You know, in that previous picture you saw, it was a wooden ladder, what we call a job-made ladder, and technically speaking, they are, compliant with OSHA requirements as long as they meet different specifications. In this case, these pictures don't meet those specifications. The picture on the left was an actual picture, I believe, taken at one of our insured job sites, where you can see all sorts of issues with the side rails. The pictures to the right, you can see a protruding nail at the top and a missing rung on the one on the bottom. And so we need to make sure that if we are using job-made ladders, that they are built safely and to specs. And here's what it should look like. We have the 2x4s working as the side rails. We have our rungs are also 2x4s, but what I see missed a lot of times is those fillers. You can see the 2x2 sections are the fillers that go in between each of the rungs. Oftentimes this is what we're missing, and again, this is coming directly from an OSHA diagram, so we want to make sure we're doing it. We also want to make sure that we're not leaving any splinters or any cracks that could cause lacerations to our employees that are using the ladders, and we don't want to paint the ladder. If we start painting these ladders, it's going to potentially hide defects, cracking, splintering, and so for job-made ladders, we definitely don't want to paint them. Some general ladder safety requirements to think of is we want to make sure that we're keeping the area around the top and the bottom of the ladder clear of any slip, trip, fall hazards. In these pictures, you can see a bunch of hand tools on the top right picture that would obviously cause a slip, trip, fall from those steps if we climbed, but also could be a struck by hazard if we move the ladder and that hammer comes flying down and hits us on our foot, especially if we're not wearing safety-toed footwear. That is going to cause a nasty injury. Instead, the option on the left you can see is one of those accessories that I talked about, a tool box or a tool belt for your ladder, essentially, that helps keep all those hand tools in a secured position, help them avoid a trip or slip hazard or a struck by hazard. Using some PVC pipe with duct tape, that could work as well, and that's the picture in the bottom right. However, I do have concerns with the duct tape potentially causing defects to the ladder, some cracking and splintering that you might not be able to see during your inspection. So again, the tool belt would probably be a safer option for you. Some other ladder requirements, using design for its use. You keep hearing that term. Well, there's a perfect example of ladders not being used for their design use. It's stacking ladders or tying them together to reach a higher elevation. The load of the ladder shouldn't be, beyond the maximum load capacity, which again, you refer to the label and you'll see that. But another one I see is ladders being cut down to a shorter size. And so that you would find when one of our extension ladders gets dinged up, we don't want to waste the fly section of that ladder, so we keep it as a shorter straight ladder. Well, it doesn't have feet. And again, that's just a component of the ladder. It may not be, again, rated for that design purpose, so you might not be able to use it. But if you refer back to the manufacturer, they should be able to give you more information on that. I mentioned that 4-to-1 ratio, and again, the most frequently cited violations that OSHA's had in 2019. So what we're talking about here is the proper angle for an extension ladder. On the left, you can see a label that has a right angle to it that helps the employees setting up that ladder know that they're at that proper angle. And on the right, you can see that we have an extension ladder that's just by a visual, we can see it's way too far away. It's too shallow, as they would say in the angle calculation. So what we're talking about here is a 4-to-1 ratio from height to vertical distance of the feet from the wall it's leaning up against. So simply put, for the diagram that you see here, we have a 16-foot tall wall or roof that we need to get onto. We have that the feet of that extension ladder 4 feet back. It's a 4-to-1 ratio, which again, if you don't want to take the time to measure it out and to do all that, there's all sorts of technology today that we should be utilizing, and this is one of them. This is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health has an app that actually you use to identify the angle that you're working with. You take your smartphone that you're using, you rest it up against one of the side rails for the ladder, and it will actually show you in that middle picture, you'll see it will provide a gauge or an angle and tell you if you're too shallow or too steep. And so a lot of the roofing jobs I go on, this is the first thing I do before I even use the ladder. I want to make sure that it's at that proper angle. I'll pull out my smartphone and put it right on the side rail, and it'll tell me. The other thing is, this is a free app, so I would encourage you all to go to your different iTunes or Play Store, wherever you download your apps, and do a simple search for NIOSH Ladder Safety App, and you'll get this one for free. The other thing when we're talking about extension ladders or accessing the upper landing surface of a roof is to make sure that we do have it secured at the top. Now, here's all sorts of different examples, and I'm not endorsing anybody by any means, or any companies or products, but I just want to show you some different examples. You know, up in the top left is a bracket type system. Looks like that could have been even fabricated in-house. In the middle, it looks like they're utilizing a chain. The right, we have a clip that's nailed down to the roof, and then a strap to cinch or choke that to a secure position. The one at the bottom is actually an interesting one that we found, where it's if anybody's been on a roof and you've had to step off of that, it secures the ladder to the parapet wall, while also providing you or your employees with a safe step off point with instead of that frosty, slippery condition, it has the anti-slip mat. So all sorts of interesting products out there. OSHA doesn't specify how you secure them. They just want to make sure that they are secured from displacement. We also want to make sure that we have our extension ladders set up tall enough so we can safely get onto or off of the ladder. And so 3 feet is what we're looking for. And so if you look at that picture to the right, oh, sorry, looks like I'm breaking up a little bit, so I apologize for that. I'll try to get closer to the microphone here. If you look at this slide here, again, we have the 3 feet that we needed extended past that upper landing surface, and the picture to the right shows us an extension ladder where we have the top 3 rungs that are actually painted red. Now, again, going back to the painting, I don't like the painting of ladders, but the reason that this specific employer did it is because they wanted their superintendents to be able to drive out to their job sites and take a look and see that red painted portion of the ladder sticking past the edge of the roof. So whether it's right or wrong, it's definitely set up with that 3 feet, as you can see from the picture. The other option is, again, an accessory for your ladders, which is side rail attachments that would give you the 3 feet you needed. So instead of stepping to the side of the ladder to get onto or off of it, you'd actually step through it. And so you wouldn't need the rungs to extend 3 feet past that edge, because you do have the side rails or the side rail attachment already doing it for you. So if anybody's used any of those attachments, they're much better than just a traditional extension ladder, in my opinion. Cross bracing should never be used as a ladder. So on a step ladder, the back side, and you'll know it's cross bracing because it's typically not uniform with the rung spacing. It's usually spaced further than what the rungs are. But in the picture, on either side, it's designed for that use, and you could actually, in a lot of cases, use 2 different employees at the same time on this ladder. Of course, one working on one side, one working on the other. Just as an additional best practice, now obviously there's going to be situations where we're working near wall openings, like new construction for a window. The railing or the wall, the bottom wall of that window is obviously not providing us with enough protection if we're working on a 6-foot tall step ladder. So in this picture that you see, they've installed a higher elevation top rail to protect anybody that was working with a ladder in this area. And you see this a lot of times with the insulators, the drywallers. They need to get their ladders that close to that wall opening. They should have a taller top rail up there, again, just as a best practice. Now, I mentioned it before, there is all sorts of different technology that's out there from the ladder industry. And this is one that I've been seeing more and more of out in the field. I mentioned it before, but there are now step ladders, as you can see from the picture, that are rated for them to be used in a collapsed and leaning position. Werner, Louisville, I believe even Keller has different products that are rated for this use. Now, this again goes back to the labels. We need to make sure that that our employees know that it's rated for this type of use, and the only way they can tell is by reading the label. The other thing is there's going to be different clips that are on these ladders to help keep them in the collapsed position. So while we're doing our ladder inspection, we need to verify that those clips are in good working condition and that that ladder cannot be opened in the wrong time when it's leaning against the wall. Fixed ladders, I'm not going to take much time. This is really just the only slide, and it's based on a change that OSHA has made, and it doesn't really take effect. You know, you can see down at the bottom, November 19 of 2036 is when everybody has to do it. But what we're talking about here is those cages that you see on the outside of a lot of warehouses and different industrial facilities for their fixed ladders that are over 24 feet. In this case, any fixed ladder taller than 24 feet, the cages are no longer going to be considered a valid means of fall protection. That doesn't mean that you have to go out and if you have a 24-foot tall fixed ladder with a cage on it currently, doesn't mean you have to go out and change it right now. And again, that goes down to the bottom bullet point there that you have till November 19th of 2036. However, if we do install a new fixed ladder at our facility, or let's say we build a new facility and it has a fixed ladder of 24 feet or higher, now we need to utilize ladder safety or fall arrest system. So that could be a self-retracting lifeline that's hooked up to a body harness. It could be the ladder safety system where it's almost like a rope grab that travels with you as you climb and descend the ladder. But if you need any assistance with this within your facilities, please contact your Argent Loss Control representative. We'd be happy to help. I do want to take a moment. There has been past injuries that I've dealt with where we've had employees fall from a fixed ladder that had failed. And in this case, it was a fixed ladder that was anchored to a masonry wall. And over time, those anchors like to rust and corrode. And as this employee was getting back onto the ladder to get down to a lower elevation roof, the ladder pulled completely from the wall. It was fastened to, and they fell, I think it was about 12 to 14 feet down to the lower elevation roof. So just like all of our other portable ladders, fixed ladders do need to be inspected periodically, and we need to take a look specifically at how they're fastened and secured. So just to end with, I hope we're not having any more audio problems. It looks like we got reconnected. But I'll just show you some pictures that I've taken over the years. Obviously with the 4 arrows, those are pointing to what I didn't like when I took this picture. And yes, I'm a huge safety geek. This is something I took while on vacation in California. But as you see, the employee is standing on the top step of a step ladder, using the cross brace as the step, which you can't do, and is also has a potential for dropping, I believe, that caulk gun onto a customer's head, which is not a good thing. The other thing we have to consider is look at where this ladder was placed. It's right in front of a doorway where this is sunny California, it's bright outside, beautiful day, and this shop is a bit dark. So that woman that you can see standing outside, if she were to turn around and come into this shop, probably wouldn't see this ladder directly in front of her, or might take her eyes to adjust in order to see it. So again, it wouldn't take much to throw this employee off balance and hit them. Here's an example of not having an aluminum or metal ladder near a conductor. If you look very closely to that outlet, the outlet is missing a cover, so we could have the potential for that ladder to touch some or come into contact with some live electrical wires. So either put the cover on or get a different fiberglass ladder would probably be a better option. Here's a concrete crew preparing formwork for foundation walls. As you can see, that is a step ladder, and to me, I believe that is not one that's rated for collapsed use. And to take it a step further, you're standing on top of the ladder itself, which we all know now is a no-no. Again, using ladders for their design purpose. In this case, we have a makeshift supported scaffold system with 2 different step ladders that are both the same manufacturer, but that plank running in between them is not from the same manufacturer. In fact, these are not rated for that type of use. What's an alternative that should have been used or could have been used? A mobile scaffold, which is pictured to the right. That could have taken care of this. Now we're using the right tool for the job that's rated for that type of use, and we're not throwing parts together that may be incompatible. The last few slides, or the last slide really that we wanted to touch on is, this was taken at the Lambeau Field. This was during some of the renovation work. As you can see, the employee is not facing the step ladder, which again, we should be facing the step ladder, keeping that belt bucket buckle between the side rails. But we also have him working from a height that's over that top railing that would protect them. Now, this is Lambeau Field. There's, could be hundreds to thousands of people that walk by each and every day. But in this case, the picture was taken on the news because there was a news story going on. So now we're talking potentially tens of thousands of people that are watching the news and see this. The other people that watch the news, instead of me, because I'm the one that took this picture, is also OSHA compliance officers. And if they see something like this, this could result in them showing up to your job site the next day. And again, fall protection, improper ladder use would be their focus. Just some other pictures to end on. Why we train. Telehandler, extending the ladder to get to that church steeple. Again, a lack of pre-planning from the linemen, not bringing the tall enough ladder out with them. I like the teamwork in the left-hand picture there. And it looks like they have the proper angle. And of course, that picture to the right, we're standing on the top step of the ladder. Now, just to make sure that we're not ending on a negative note and showing you something that's actually positive, this is a roofing job site that one of my colleagues had taken a picture of because he was very impressed with what he saw. He saw the extension ladder set at the right angle. If you look closely, you can see the rope with the pulley for safely extending and retracting that fly section of the ladder. We have the side rail attachments so we can actually step through those instead of stepping off to the side. We have guard railings within 6 feet of that roof, and then warning lines strung up, as that's the roofer's primary means of fall protection on a low slope roof, and also a gate in front. So there is a lot of positive out there. I didn't want to leave everybody with a bad taste in their mouth. We do see a lot of good things from our insureds and our customers and from our daily life of being out in the field. And so definitely wanted to end on that. Some other pieces of documents that you might be interested in or other resources. American Ladder Institute has a lot of good information. OSHA obviously has a bunch of fact sheets, and WB Connect is where we keep all of our loss control materials, which we are adding to each and every day. And so keep your eye out for new ones from ladders coming within the next month or two. And as always, you can contact your Argent Loss Control representative if you can't find what you need on there. I will ask for any questions. I'm looking through the chat. It's hard to keep up with the chat with all the issues that it seems that we had with audio. But if anybody can still hear me out there and does have a question, I will give you a minute here. So doesn't look like we have any questions. Obviously, you did see my email at the start of the presentation. You know your appointed loss control representative can also get a hold of me as well, so feel free to take that route. I apologize for any audio problems that we might have had today. I appreciate you guys letting me know that we did have them. If we do need to re-record this, I will definitely do that and get it up on WB Connect. I will want to remind you too that our monthly webinar series will be having stretching programs as our topic for next month in July. So keeping a lookout for that, as we always email you the registration information. So again, I thank you for your time today, and everybody have a safe day.